announcements. What did I just say? Hello, people watching the video.
Iowa State won.
Iowa State won.
Iowa.
Youth group thing tonight in Neola, if you want to be a part of that. No class next week. Back in 2 weeks. Is that everything? We covered it? Yeah, okay, cool. Sermon note question. Somebody asked, why did God let the human name the animals in the second creation story? Good question. I don't really know why God made that choice, but I think it's kind of cool that God invited humanity into the action of creation. We didn't do the creating, or the human didn't do the creating, but God invited them to join in the work. Does that make sense? Kind of? Anyway, yeah, all right. I also think it reflects the statement that God made that humanity is going to have dominion over the earth and other forms of life, which is kind of a weird thing, but maybe it's all tied in. So I think that's where that comes from. How was the world created? Hello, Sunderlands. So anybody remember how many accounts of creation we have in here? I'll give you a hint. It's more than one. Two. We have 2 accounts of creation there. However, pretty much every major civilization has stories about where did the world come from. And when the Old Testament, as we know it now, was recorded, it was written down for the first time, it was during a period known as the Babylonian captivity. We will talk about this down the road. 8th graders, we maybe talked a little bit about it last year. I don't remember.
We're talking about that in school.
Oh yeah, the Babylonian Empire?
Yes.
Yes. So the Babylonian Empire, about 750 years before Jesus-ish, give or take, was the superpower of the day, and they came in and they kind of took over Israel and hauled a bunch of people off in exile. You guys know what exile means? Didn't get rid of them, but like took them off, and they basically lived as slaves or various things. Hey, Lynn. So it was during that time that the Old Testament, as we know it, kind of got recorded. And they were in the midst of the Babylonian culture. And the Babylonian culture has a myth or a story about how the world was created as well. And it's kind of odd. There were 2 gods, lowercase g. One was named Marduk, and one was named Tiamat. And Marduk got mad at Tiamat and killed him, or her. I don't remember what gender they were. But then Marduk used the body of Tiamat to create the world. Weird, right? Kind of a strange story. What's odd about that is that the world was created through death and destruction in the Babylonian understanding. Whereas in the Jewish understanding from the Old Testament that we have, the world was created by God out of a process of like joy and delight. Because what did God call every step of the way? So good, right? Yeah. So it's like, so we have, the world was created because like somebody killed someone, which is weird and gross. Or the world was created in a way that expresses delight in our Creator. Cool? Yeah. So that's kind of a comparison. But ultimately, how was the world created? I don't know, I wouldn't know. All I know is it's here, right? Or, fun fact, fact is the wrong word, fun idea, maybe this is all just a simulation that God has created to mess with us. Anybody ever play The Sims? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a game called The Sims. My daughter's obsessed with it. Yeah, and it's basically like you create little worlds and people like do stuff. Maybe we're all just Sims, I don't know. Do I have a weird icon over my head? No, probably not. So, all right. Why does God name the first person Adam, aka dirt? What did God make the first person out of? Dirt. Yeah. So remember we've talked about in Hebrew, especially names usually mean something specific. So Adam or Adam means the one from dirt. So I don't know. So God was very on the nose in terms of names. That's the only thing I can figure out. Okay. Who wants to open us today?
O Lord, rescue us from those who suffer, rescue those who are afraid, rescue those who are hungry, Rescue those who are hurting. Make us instruments of your will. Help us to those who need you. Amen.
Amen. Did you sense a theme in there? Rescue. Okay. What do you think we're maybe going to talk about today? Rescuing, kind of. All right. So where did we leave off last week? Those who were here. Anybody remember? Egypt. And who went to Egypt first? Joseph. Why? As a slave. Because his brothers were jerks, right?
Because he was a favorite.
He was the favorite. Was he 100% perfect though?
No.
No, he was a bit of a jerk himself, right? Yeah. Okay. So we left off in Egypt. Joseph has risen in the ranks in Egypt. How high does he rank?
The second in command.
Second in command behind who?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Correct. How many brothers did he have? 11. Are you reading or do you remember that? Nice. Okay. Who's his dad? Anyone remember? It also starts with a J.
Jacob.
Jacob is his dad. So as Genesis leaves off, which is where we ended last week, we have Joseph, who's second in command in Egypt, brings his dad, Jacob, and all of his brothers, basically the whole household, to Egypt, and they settle in the land of Goshen. Goshen is apparently like a little region of Egypt, so like a little section. Okay, so I don't know, like Potawatomi County. Yeah. I don't know if it's counted or not, but that's the example. So they all settle in this little section, kind of adjacent to or part of Egypt. We are moving into the book of Exodus, second book. Everybody go ahead and find it. So if you're in Genesis, you've not gone far enough. If you hit, I think it's Leviticus. We're going to start at the beginning, basically. So just find Exodus. You just find the beginning of Exodus. Should be real far in. How far are you? Page 40. Okay. We mentioned this last week. You picked up on it. It's okay if you didn't. Anybody remember roughly how many years passes between the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus? More than 25. How many?
300.
You're close, but not quite high enough.
350.
A little bit more.
370.
A little bit more.
375.
400.
There you go. 400. Okay, 8th graders, you remember this from last year? If I ask you to judge an amount of years, or numbers, or whatever, what are good guesses?
High numbers.
You just used one of them.
400.
400 is a real good guess. If it's a shorter period of time, 40 is a real good guess. Sometimes 10 is a really good guess. In this case, 400. So roughly 400 years goes on between Genesis and Exodus. Now, do you think Jacob is still around?
No.
Do you think Joseph is still around?
No.
Do you think Pharaoh is still around?
No.
We should say that specific Pharaoh. Is there probably still a different Pharaoh?
Yes.
Yeah, because Pharaoh of the kings, right? Yeah, okay. So there's a guy that's pretty active in the book of Exodus. He goes by the name of Moses. Have you heard of this guy before?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Moses, what's Moses known for? You know? He split the Red Sea, not the river. There are some other stories about rivers that happens, but with him it's the Red Sea. That's later on. We'll actually probably get to there today. What else was he known for?
Didn't he fight something?
He didn't really fight, but he definitely had headbutts with people. Who do you think he probably had headbutts with?
Pharaoh.
Yes, Pharaoh. Why?
But he wanted that unslave.
He wanted to unslave. I like that word. Who were the slaves? His people. Yes, aka the Israelites, right? Or sometimes we hear them called the Hebrews. They're not really called Jewish yet. That will happen down the road. So Hebrews or Israelites. Yes. Before we get to that point, that's roughly 430 years-ish after the end of Genesis. But we've got to, I don't know, I've got a weird little note in there. But his story actually starts before that, roughly 350 years after the end of Genesis. So we started with one really big family, right? Like a dad and 12 brothers and all of their offspring and such. Do you think over the course of roughly 350 years they stayed the exact same number?
No.
Or did they multiply? Multiply. There's a lot of them. A lot. Because, what? Oh, way more than that.
4,000.
Well, a lot more than that.
40,000.
We'll bump this up to somewhere between 1 and 2 million. So there's a lot. So Potawatomi County has got really full.
So 11 times 2. Now.
I don't know. They multiplied a lot. Let's just say that. Okay? Because think about it this way. If every kid has a batch of kids, anywhere from 1 or 2 all the way up to, I don't know, 12 or more. And then the next generation does the exact same thing. And then the next generation does the exact same thing. And on and on and on and on. It's going to multiply exponentially. That's a big mathematical term. You know there's going to be math there. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Sometimes I bring up math. So. Trying to escape from math? My bad. We'll step away from math. But yes, so there are a lot of them. Now, we already established what is their socioeconomic status in Egypt.
Low.
Well, they're slaves. Yeah. Why do you think that they were enslaved?
Because there were so
The
much of
area
them.
that they had was big.
No. There's so many of them. Who might be worried about the numbers of them? The Egyptians. Why?
Because they had
Yeah. Yeah, like there's a lot of them over there, and some of them are pretty big, and they might take us out. So let's treat them so poorly and badly that they'll never even think about it. Does this compute? Like, so that they don't rise up against us, let's treat them like garbage. I didn't say the Egyptians were smart, but I don't know. So, all right. So the Egyptians have enslaved them. Remember, how did the Egyptians feel about Joseph back in the day? They liked him, right? Because he was really smart, and so they looked favorably upon him, and even Pharaoh did. Like, you guys are cool. We like you. We dig you. We're going to treat you well. 350 years later, we don't like you. We're going to turn you into slaves. Things have changed, right? Okay. Yes. So, we already talked about that. Okay. Talked about that. So, in the midst of all this, as they continue to multiply, and the Egyptians have been treating them badly for a while, there is this one Pharaoh who's like, maybe we miscalculated on this a little bit. We're kind of treating them poorly. That might be an incentive for them to rise up against us. So maybe we should take some steps against that. So he comes up with this spectacular idea that when when a Hebrew or Israelite baby is born, they talk to the midwives. You guys know what a midwife is? No. It's kind of like the doctor who delivers the baby. So the Pharaoh tells the midwives, when a Hebrew baby is born, if it's a girl, cool, no problem. If it's a boy, death, kill it. Because if you kill all the boys, there won't be any men rising up to rise up against the Egyptians. Wonderful plan, right?
No.
No, not so much. You think the midwives are like, yeah, we're down with that?
No.
Or they're like, no. They don't want to kill babies. So they don't. And then Pharaoh's like, dudes, or dudettes, I told you to do something. I just used the word do that. I just made myself sound really old. It happens. You guys know this about me. I'm a nerd. It's all good. So they're like, hey, I told you to do this. And they're like, well, they had the baby so fast, we're not even there yet. So by the time we're already there, the baby's born. There's nothing to do. Yeah? Weird? Weird? Weird. This book is weird. I love it, but it's weird. There's weird stuff in there. All right. Yeah, I talked about that. Okay. Now, in the midst of all this, we have the birth of one specific person. Who do you think it is? Moses? Yes. Moses is born. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Moses is probably a guy, right? So do you think he gets killed by the whole midwife thing? No. No. However, at this point, now the Pharaoh is sending the army around to be like, boys. So what do you know? What do you remember about Moses when he's a baby? What happens? You remember? Anyone?
He survived.
He does.
The very
If he died, the story would be difficult, right? Yeah, no. So he survives. His family hides him for like 3 months. So for 3 months, somehow he escapes the notice of anyone. But then, I don't know what happens, but all of a sudden mom's like, this really isn't working very well. I don't know what to do. So she puts him in a basket, puts him in the river, and then sends older sister by the name of Miriam. We'll hear more about her later. Sends Miriam to kind of keep an eye on things to see what happens. Anybody remember what happens?
He gets picked up by an Egyptian.
Yes. You know which one?
The Pharaoh's daughter.
Correct. Pharaoh's daughter finds him. He's like, oh, he's so cute. He's so cute. Oh. I'm in the mood today. It happens. Basically adopts him, and he is raised in the palace. He's raised as an Egyptian, but seemingly he still knows he's Hebrew or he's Israelite. And I don't know why that is. I don't know exactly what, like, if there's, like physical differences. I don't know. We don't know that specifically. But so he's raised in the palace, and so he's Hebrew, knows he's Hebrew, but he's raised as an Egyptian. Okay? How many years do you think go by?
40.
40. Not 400. 40. Okay, so how old is Moses?
40.
40. He's like almost as old as me. Poor guy. Yeah. So at this point, he's kind of wandering around, and he sees an Egyptian picking on a Hebrew. You think he likes that? No. What do you think he does? Yeah. He kills the Egyptian and hides his body in the sand. Nice guy, right? Like, Moses, dude, really? Like, can you just tell him to knock it off? No, let's kill him. Yeah. So he kills him, and then he gets freaked out because he's like, well, I just killed someone. That's not good. So he runs away. Like, just runs away. And he hides in the desert for a while. He wanders around for quite a while. He's kind of gotten away from Egypt, so he's kind of off and over here. In a land called Midian. I don't know exactly where Midian is, but it's not in Egypt. Okay? And he meets a guy named the priest of Midian. I forget what his name is. Jethro. I just remember what his name is. His name is Jethro. And so Moses is like, hey, dude, can I hang out with you? I'll be a shepherd for you. Oh, by the way, I like one of your daughters getting married. And so he does. And more time goes by. How much time do you think goes by?
40 years.
Another 40 years. How old is the dude now?
80.
He's 80. He's already 80-ish. Yes, ish. I'm glad you're picking up on that. He's 80-ish. And so he's been serving his father-in-law as a shepherd for this entire time, which I don't know if he liked that or not, but either way, time has gone by, and he's out one day, and he's shepherding. He's doing his little shepherd thing, and all of a sudden he looks up at the side of the mountain, and he sees a bush on fire, which is strange, right? We're not talking about a burning bush that turns red in the fall and looks really pretty. This is a bush that's literally on fire. Now, if a bush was on fire, what would happen to the bush?
It will burn.
It'll burn up and go away, right? This one is not consumed, aka the fire just keeps burning. And Moses is like, that's weird. I should maybe go look at that. So he does. Who is in the bush? Church answer. Not Jesus. God. Yes, God is in the bush, and the voice of God comes out of the bush, and it's like, Moses, dude, or whatever the Hebrew is for dude. Like, you're on holy ground, take off your shoes. And then Moses takes off his shoes and like falls face down on the ground, and God talks to him for a while. And we're going to pick up now in Exodus chapter 2.
120 years old.
No, still 80. Still 80. Preview, 120 will be important after a while. Like 40 years later. Okay. Exodus chapter 2, verse 23 is where we're going to pick up. Yes, I like that. Okay. 23 and 24, Ivan, will you read up this?
Yes. Can I read it from here?
Yes.
You do not speak. Okay. Right here.
No. Sorry, chapter 2, verse 23. I should have specified. So right at the table.
During that long period, the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out. And the cry for help because of the slavery went out to them. God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked after the Israelites and was concerned them.
Okay, cool. So during this whole time that they've been slaves, have they just sat there? What did they do?
Revolted.
They didn't revolt. Who did they ask for deliverance? Not Moses. God. They're like, hey God, remember that whole covenant you made with our ancestor Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob, and then Joseph, and there's the hooligans? They're actually fairly white. Impressive. Hey God, remember all that? It's been centuries, and we're slaves, and we don't like it. And God notices, right? Does God take action during that time?
No.
Seemingly no, which is kind of a bummer. But God remembers, God takes notice, God hears them, and God's like, we're going to do something about this. Because I think we see evidence in this story that we have a God who sides with the downtrodden, yeah? With those who are marginalized. And God remembers the covenant, aka the promise, made with Abraham all those generations before. So, God shows up in the wilderness as a burning bush. And here's the funny part. If you're reading it in the Hebrew, and this is weird, I don't expect you guys to read it in Hebrew, but when Moses notices the burning bush, he says, I must turn aside and take a look at this. Now, this is funny, it's also really dumb, and this is me being a junior high boy, so you'll probably all laugh at this too. To turn aside is a euphemism for he has to pee. I must turn aside from my journey that I'm on because I got to use the bathroom. So it's during the time that he's turned aside that he notices the burning bush. God shows up when Moses is peeing. Maybe. Probably didn't actually happen that way. Ish. I think that's hilarious and just is evidence that either A, I'm really weird, which we all know, or B, there's funny stuff in here too. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So God shows up. And basically, over the course of a really long discourse, a really long time, God tells Moses, I want you to go to Pharaoh and you're going to tell him, let my people go. Who are God's people?
Israelites.
The Israelites, right. And Moses is like, I don't want to do that. Remember, I killed someone there. They might kind of have it in for me. Plus, I don't really want to go to Pharaoh and tell him something he's not going to like. Because I'm basically telling him, hey, all your slaves, let them go. You think that's going to go over real well? No, not going to go over so well. So Moses doesn't really want to do it. And he's like, who am I that you would send me? And God's like, it's all good, dude. Don't worry about it. And they kind of go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then Moses says, well, okay, but if I tell the people that you sent me and they ask me your name, what should I tell them? And he's like, tell them I am. Weird name, right? Yeah, but think about it, I am. Well, that means that whoever God is. Like, I exist? Oh, I don't know. It's a weird name. Moses is like, well, that's weird. And they continue bickering for quite a while. So, do you think Moses is really interested in doing this? He seems a little freaked out by it, right? Yeah, he doesn't really want to do it. Finally, the funny part is, let's see, everybody find chapter 4, verse 10. So go ahead just a little bit. And finally, Moses says to God that essentially what he's trying to say is, I don't talk good. Like, I'm not a good public speaker. Listen to the way that he says it. Moses said to the Lord, oh, my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Does this sound like he can't speak very well?
Yeah. No.
Or he got a really good writer. Yeah. So, basically, he's like, I've got another excuse, and they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. God gets mad to the point where he's about ready to kill him, which makes it difficult for him to go on a mission, right? But they go back and forth, and finally God tells Moses, fine, I'll send you your brother Aaron, who is a good public speaker, and together the two of you will do this, and it happens, and they head off to Egypt. All right, zip ahead to chapter 5. So now Moses and Aaron have gotten back to Egypt and they've gone to Pharaoh. I'll read this part. We're going to read like the first 9 verses. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go so that they may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should heed and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. So how's Pharaoh acting so far? Is he very agreeable? Not so much. Okay. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has revealed himself to us. Let us go a 3-day journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, or he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword. King of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking people away from their work? Get to work. Pharaoh continued, they are more numerous than the people of the land, and yet you want them to stop working. So that same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their supervisors, you shall no longer give the people straw in order to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather it themselves. Require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it, for they are lazy. And this is why they cry, let us go and offer sacrifice to our God. Let a heavier work be laid upon them, and then they will labor at it and pay no attention to these deceptive works. All right, we got Moses showing up.
We basically made it worse.
Yes. Like, let the people go. Who? What people? The people of God. Who is this God? I don't know this God. He's our God. You should let us go. We only want to go 3 days so we can have a festival. AKA lying. But Pharaoh's like, no, let's make him work harder. So as Moses is going on this little journey, going on this mission, does he immediately make it better for the people?
Worse.
It gets worse, which is a bummer, right? Yeah, okay. So things are not starting off well. So now Moses decides to have a little heart-to-heart with God. And this happens in chapter 6. And basically it's kind of a repeat of what has already happened. Like, hey, God, you sent me. I was supposed to do this stuff. It got worse. I don't know what to do. And God's like, hey, it's all good. Go back and talk to him again. Back and forth, right? Back and forth. They go back and forth a lot. And God is also reminding Moses of the covenant and all that stuff, basically all the stuff that we've already talked about. God's like, hey, remember all this stuff from your history? It's important. Let's do that. So things are not going real well. Now we're going to go through a list of 10 things that happened. Do you know what 10 things I'm talking about? Anyone remember the story? Graham, you remember? Not the 10 Commandments. That's coming later. 10 things happen as a way for God, through Moses, to finally convince Pharaoh to let the people go. And none of them are good. It starts with a P and ends with legs.
Plagues.
Plagues. If you hear the word plague, what does it sound like?
Sickness.
Sickness. Bad things, right? Yeah. Sickness is one of them. Can we name 10 plagues?
Bubonic plague?
That is a plague. That's not one of the 10 plagues. Do you remember what they are?
No.
I gotta stop and think about. I can remember what they are. So the water gets turned into blood. That's one. There's a plague of frogs, which is weird, but okay.
The frog story.
Frog story. Not that frog story. There's a plague of flies. There's a plague of gnats. There's a plague of boils. There's fiery hail, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's a plague of darkness. Seven is not 10. I'm blanking on what, well, I know what one of them is. I'm blanking on two of them. Okay. So I'm going to give you the rundown, besides just trying to name them myself. Each time this happens, we're not going to read it all because it's like 7 chapters long. It's pretty long. Every time this happens, God tells Moses, I want you to do this, and then go tell the Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh's going to kind of like maybe relent a little bit, and then he's going to change his mind over and over and over. Okay? So Moses kind of knows what's up. So the first thing I want you to do is take your stick, your walking stick, and I want you to strike the Nile. What's the Nile? The river, the main river in Egypt, the main water source in Egypt. I want you to smack the Nile, and it's going to turn into blood, which is gross, right? All the fish are going to die, which is gross, right? And it's also going to happen in all of the pools and the lakes and the wells. It becomes blood. I don't know how it happened, but apparently it did. So does this sound like a lovely thing? No, not so great. It lasts for about a week. But then Pharaoh's like, this is just a trick. I will have my magicians do the same thing, and they try to fix it, but they make it worse somehow. So it lasts for like a week. Do you think Pharaoh's like, okay, I'm convinced I'm going to let your people go? No. Okay. That's plague number 1. Plague number 2, the frogs. They come up out of the Nile, which is maybe understandable if it's turned to blood. You think the frogs want to stay in there? No. It's gross. So basically, Kermit the Frog comes jumping out with all his buddies, and they're climbing all over everything for a long time. They go in the houses, they cover everything. So Pharaoh's like, I'm not convinced. Look, my magicians can do the same thing. And they do. So rather than fixing the problem, they double it. Pharaoh's an idiot. Yeah? Yeah, okay. Do you think Pharaoh says, okay, you can go?
No.
No, because we're only through 2 plagues. All right. And at this point now, when his magicians can't make it any better, he starts to realize, oh shoot, I might have messed up though. So he has Moses come in. He's like, hey, pray to God that these frogs will go away, and then I'll let you go. Moses is like, cool. So he prays to God, the frogs go away. Does Pharaoh let him go? No. Okay. Pharaoh changes his mind. We'll find he does that a lot. Okay, plague number 3. Moses, take your stick, smack the ground, the dust, and all of the dust will turn into gnats. What are gnats?
Not a disgusting bug.
They're gross little flies, right? They're a pain in the butt. And Pharaoh's like, hey, magicians, can you match this? And they're like, no, we already did it twice. We're not doing it again. They're like, hey, this is clearly Moses' God. Maybe you should listen. Do you think Pharaoh listens? No. Okay. Plague number 4, flies. Kind of the same situation as gnats, only bigger, right? Yep. Pretty much the same thing happens. Now, Pharaoh says, fine, you can make sacrifices to your God, but you have to do it right here. Okay, you said you wanted to take them out to go do a festival. You can do your festival, but do it here. Is that what Moses is really after? No. Okay. Moses is like, no, we need to go 3 days away. And then Pharaoh says, fine, pray that the flies go away and I'll let you go. What happens? He prays, flies go away. And he changes his mind. Yep, you are picking up what I'm putting down. Okay, plague number 5. Pestilence strikes the livestock of Egypt. What's pestilence?
They'll die.
They get really sick.
Sickness.
Some of them probably do die. But it's only the livestock of the Egyptians. The Israelites also have livestock. Theirs are fine. Don't know why this is, but that's what happens. Pharaoh gets really, really mad, but what does he say?
Fix this.
Fix this.
We'll let you go.
I'll let you go. Do they go?
Changes his mind.
Changes his mind. Yep. Okay. Now, plague number 6. Moses, grab a handful of dust, throw it up in the air. Everything that a speck of dust touches will turn into a really gross and disgusting boil. You guys know what a boil is?
Like a bad, like big.
It's like a big, nasty, infected blister. So everybody gets boils, which is gross. Pharaoh's still like, not convinced. Nope, you can't go. Now things get really, really serious. We're up to plague number 7. Fiery hail. What the heck does that sound like? Hail on fire, which ice on fire. Strange, weird, a bit supernatural perhaps. Yeah, so there's going to be fiery hail. Now Moses warns them. He's like, you're going to want to get your livestock inside because this big, ginormous, fiery hail is going to fall, and anything that's outside is probably going to get killed. Some people listen. Who do you think listens? Israelites. Who do you think doesn't?
The Egyptians.
The Egyptians. What do you think happens?
The Egyptians' livestock.
The Egyptians' livestock die, and some of the servants as well. Not good. Yeah, rough. So if people are outside, they're going to get beat up just as bad as a cow or a goat or whatever. And so the big hail happens. Now, have any of you ever seen a really nasty hailstorm? What does it do to a field?
It destroys it.
It beats it up. So this also happens. So now not only is the livestock all beat up, so is their crops. Now, Pharaoh is getting scared all of a sudden. And he literally begs Moses, man, make this stop. Which he does. And then he changes his mind again. Yes. All right, plague number 8, locusts. That's the one that I forgot. You know what a locust is? It's like a ginormous grasshopper. Yeah. And they swarm. You ever heard of locust swarms? Like clouds of it. Gross. So all these locusts come in. They cover the land, and every scrap of plant life that didn't get beat up by the hail gets eaten by the locusts. So like crops gone. So now at this point, Pharaoh's really kind of freaking out. He actually recognizes that he has even sinned against God. We're getting serious now, right? Yeah. Okay. And he asked Moses to pray, not that it will stop, but pray for me specifically. Because I have sinned. Woo! I am freaked out. Like, I have clearly messed up. So Moses does.
Changes his mind.
Big wind comes up. All the locusts, like, fly away. Or get blown away or die or something. I don't know. Locusts are gone. And he changes his mind again because Pharaoh is an idiot. Or fickle. Okay, plague number 9. This one's interesting. Darkness. Darkness described as so thick you can feel it. What does that sound like? Haunted house, maybe. Like, clearly, like no light whatsoever. And it's a weird thing, like oppressive. Like there is no light, no one can see anything. But here's the really, really funny part. It's described as only being in the land of Egypt, not in Goshen. Who was in Goshen? The Israelites. So I always wondered, like, what happened right at the barrier, at the boundary? Like, it's so dark, I can't see anything. Oh, there's light. Kind of weird. Pharaoh says at this point, fine, you can go and worship your God, but you have to leave all your livestock here. So, like, you can go, but you got to leave all your stuff. And Moses is like, well, that doesn't work. We have to have livestock to have sacrifices, because they did sacrifices. They did animal sacrifices. They're like, well, we have to take our livestock too. So Pharaoh's like, okay, no. Because that's his speed, right? Yeah, all right. Okay. Additionally, at this point, we've had 9 plagues. How many plagues are there total? 10. So we got one more, which is really extreme. And at this point, Pharaoh says, I want you to leave. If I ever see you again, you are dead. Like, I will literally kill you. And that's not a metaphor. He says, if I see you again, you die. So it's getting real now. Now, anybody remember what the last plague is? The death of the firstborn. Have you heard of this? 8th graders, you may remember this event known as the Passover, which we talked about before. 7th graders, you might remember this from when we did communion class a couple of years ago. Yeah, Passover, death of the firstborn. So it's all one big thing. Now, Exodus chapter 12, which we're not going to read because there's a lot of it, it describes the Passover and the 10th plague. Now, does anybody remember what happens in Passover?
They have to sacrifice spread the blood over your doorframe.
They sacrifice an animal, like a lamb, right? Yep. And they make a meal out of it too, right? Yep. And then they take the blood and they paint it over their doorframe. So when the angel of death comes over and sees that house and sees the blood, it will do what?
It won't kill them.
It won't do, it will do what? It will pass over that house, hence the name Passover, right? Now, what happens to that house if there's no blood over the door?
They all die.
Do they all die? Or does the oldest die? The oldest child dies. So, how many of you are oldest? Nash?
Not me.
Jace? Graham? Sorry, dudes, you guys are dead. I'm the youngest. I'm okay. You two are good. You've got an older brother. You guys have an older brother. You have an older brother. Libby, do you have an older sibling? You have 2, so you're okay as well. So we're going, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 3 out of 10 of us are gone. Sorry, dudes, I will miss you. I'm kidding, of course, but this is what happens. So the 10th plague, death of the firstborn, angel of death comes through, passes over the houses of the Israelites because they have all followed the command that God gave through Moses. The Egyptians do not. So in the households of the Egyptians, a lot of people are dead, right? Including the firstborn of Pharaoh. Like his kid dies. Do you think this gets his attention? Yes. What does he finally say?
Yeah.
Get out. Take your stuff and go.
Never come back.
Don't come back. Like, clearly, if we keep this up and I don't let you go, like, Egypt will be gone. Because this God is not willing to be trifled with. I trifled, bad things happen. Yeah? Including the death of his own kid. So they all leave. Roughly 2 million people all leave. Now, what is a word for leaving? Sometimes you'll see exit. Okay, so this word is going to sound a little bit like exiting, and I'll give you a hint. It's probably at the top corner of your page because it's the book of the Bible. Exodus. They all leave in a giant exit, aka Exodus. Where are they leaving?
To the Red Sea.
They're going that way, but where are they leaving?
Egypt.
Egypt. Yeah. So the book of Exodus refers to when they actually leave Egypt. The entire culture. That's where the name comes from. But they're not very far away from us. They're basically going to the Red Sea. That's where things pick up. Now, what have we learned about about Pharaoh so far? Based on these 10 plagues. He's not smart. He's scared. But he's also really stubborn, right? Yes. He basically thinks, I know better. So he's really, 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 really stubborn. So now he looks out there and he's like, oh, look at all of our slaves going. Think he changes his mind?
Yeah.
Again? Dude. But he does. Sends his army. Let's go chase them. Let's go bring them back. Okay? Go to chapter 14. Everybody there? If we pick up at verse 5, we basically hear this. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his officials were changed towards the people. Sound familiar?
Yes.
He changed his mind again. What have we done letting Israel leave our service? So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 chariots and all the other chariots, so a lot of chariots, of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his chariot drivers, and his army, and they overtook them camped by the sea by a really weird name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce. Okay, so Pharaoh goes after them. And does Pharaoh go after them alone? Or does he take basically his entire military? Yeah, basically his entire military. Okay. Now what happens? We're at the Red Sea. We've mentioned this before.
He did something to the Red Sea.
He splits.
Yes, things happen. So basically, the Israelites are all like next to the sea, and they're like, "We're free! Yay! We haven't gone very far, but we're free!" And they're having a big party. And then all of a sudden, somebody looks backwards, and what do they see? The army coming there. Oh, what are we gonna do? So they're like, "Moses, help!" And Moses is like, "God, help!" And God does something really, really, really weird. God shows up as a pillar of fire.
Wow.
Freaky. So like, imagine a fiery tornado. Sounds weird, right? Yeah. And this fiery tornado goes between the Israelites and the Egyptians, okay? Creating a bit of a barrier, right? So protecting them. But, so they got fiery tornado here. What's in front of them? The Red Sea, which is big. And you think they can just like, okay, we're gonna walk across. No, okay. So then God, I don't know if God's talking out of fire tornado or what. God's like, "Hey Moses, you know that stick that you've done so many things with?" Yeah, he says, "Strike the water." He strikes the water, what happens?
It splits.
It splits.
A great big wind comes up out of nowhere and blows the water apart, leaving dry ground in the middle and walls of water on each side. What do? They walk through on dry ground. Now think about this. If you actually went to an ocean or whatever, is the bottom dry?
No.
Yeah, so this is utterly miraculous, mind-blowingly so. Can you imagine walking through and there's like a fish swimming? Dinner. So they all walk through. Meanwhile, the fire tornado is still there. Gradually, they get across. Fire tornado goes away. So the barrier between Israelites and who? The Egyptians, the army, is gone. What do you think the army does?
Tries to get through.
Let's go after them. We're in chariots. We're faster. They're walking. Ha! We'll kill them. Yay! And then the Israelites get to the other side. What does God tell Moses to do? Hold up your stick again. Hold up a stick. What happens to the walls of water?
They close.
Who's in there?
The Egyptians.
Yeah. What do you think happens to them?
They like.
Is the
They
Pharaoh
die.
dead?
They take the curse.
What?
Is the Pharaoh dead too?
I don't think so. Well, no, I think he is there. I can't remember. Depends on if you're watching the really old movie that's like 900 hours long, or if you read this. Yeah, I think Pharaoh is with them. I think Pharaoh also dies. So basically, the entire military dies, and miraculously, somehow the Egyptians have crossed not an ocean but a sea, and are saved. Okay, so they have seen a whole lot of miraculous things happen, right? The Israelites have. They witnessed all of the plagues, which they were somehow spared from, and they witnessed the fire tornado, which we'll see again later. Sometimes it's also just like a pillar of smoke, which is great. But sometimes it's smoke, sometimes it's fire. And hey, where there's smoke, there's fire. Sorry, bad joke. I'm in quite the mood today, aren't I? Yeah, okay. So they've witnessed all of these miraculous things, and now they are free. Where are they off to? Anyone know? Where are they trying to go to?
Israel.
they're trying to go to what we would now call Israel, right? But they call it the promised land. Promised to who? By God, to think back way many generations. Before Joseph,
Isaac.
before Isaac,
Ishmael.
Abraham.
their dad,
Abraham.
Abraham. Yeah, they're going to the land that was promised to Abraham so many generations before. Do you think they go there immediately?
No.
They're kind of wandering for a little bit. They're wandering, and this we're going to pick up with this next week a little bit. But they're like wandering, and they're like, okay, we're walking because there's a lot of us. We're not moving real fast. We're going there, and it's not real far where they have to go. It's a ways, but it's not real far. And again, preview of next week. Eventually, they're getting real close, and a few people go and scout things out.
They never come back.
They do come back.
Oh.
And they're freaked out. Again, preview of next week. 2 weeks. No class next week. Preview of 2 weeks from now. They come back and they're freaked out. It's like, we don't really want to fight these people who are here and take it over. So they spread a bad report. And God's like, fine, you want to go? Wander in the desert till you die. I'll send your kids. How many years did they wander?
400.
40.
40. Okay. Is Moses still with them the whole time? Yes. Until right at the end.
Yeah.
So let's recap. How long did Moses live in Egypt?
120.
Nope. 40. How long did Moses live in Midian?
40.
How long did Moses wander with the people?
40.
40.
How old is Moses when this letter is
120.
120. Dude is old. Okay? That's next week. Who wants to pray something? 2 weeks from now. Sorry, I'm used to next week. Who wants to pray something? I don't know.
Dear God, thank you for this day of learning. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Yes, no class next week.